Many of the most important players weren't there. Is it another agreement that won't hold? Hello, I'm Khida Fakhri in Washington. This is Al Jazeera. There may be a glimmer of hope for ending the conflict in Somalia. A peace deal has been signed after talks between Somalia's factions seemed on the brink of collapse. But will it have any long-term impact if some of the major armed factions weren't even there? Somalia's interim government and some opposition leaders reached the agreement at the UN-backed meeting in Jabuuti. Any deal may be welcome news for a nation that's been crippled by 18 years of violence. Key to the agreement is ending all hostilities within 30 days. Ethiopian troops should withdraw from Somalia within 120 days. And they've agreed to meet in Mecca in Saudi Arabia on the 30th of July to discuss power sharing. But with several major opposition players not even at those talks, the question now is whether this deal can last when so many others have failed. Our correspondent Mohammed Ado reports from Nairobi.
Dogged by mistrust and suspicion, the Somali peace talks in Djibouti got off to a bad start. And just when everyone thought they would yield nothing, they did. Just hours after the UN Special Envoy to Somalia, Ahmedu Ould Abdullah, expressed concern at the lack of progress of the talks, the two sides hastily signed a historic agreement. Somali Prime Minister Nur Hassan Hussein signed the accord with the leaders of the opposition Alliance for the Liberation of Somalia, ARS. The parties agreed to cease hostilities within a month. They also agreed to facilitate the withdrawal of Ethiopian troops from Somalia within 120 days. However, this will not happen before the deployment of UN peacekeepers to Somalia. This is to avoid a security vacuum and a further worsening of the already volatile situation in the anarchic nation. The two sides agreed to meet at the end of next month in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, to thrash out pending political issues, key among them a power-sharing deal. According to aid agencies, at least 6,000 civilians have died in fighting in Somalia over the past year. It is now the hope of the country's war-weary residents that the deal in Djibouti will hold and all the remaining parties will join the peace process.
And we always advocate for a peace agreement, but what's missing from this agreement is that it's not inclusive. And that's what we have been advocating always.
Why weren't many of the armed groups, the opposition armed groups, included in this agreement?
Why weren't they included? From what I understand, the agreement has been rushed. They have not taken time to persuade enough people to include in this particular issue. And of course, you had the breakdown of the alliance group who had experienced some disagreement amongst them.
But you say it was rushed. I mean, could the situation afford to drag on for much longer without some sort of agreement?
Well, it has been rushed as far as how fast they decided to hold the agreement for this month in May, the past month in May and June. But you're right, it has been dragging on for a long time. But the reason every agreement has failed is because always everyone has waited and they rushed at the end.
But when you say they, who are you blaming?
I'm talking about not only the Somalis. Of course, Somalis are to blame because this is a self-inflicted wound. But the international community really did not play the role it has supposed to play in this particular issue, because the UN actually has sanctioned the illegal occupation of Ethiopia, and Washington also has given it this tacit support. Therefore, the Somalis see this as though that they have been imposed on a government that's made up of warlords.
How do you see the role of the United States? Because one of the key elements in this agreement is that Ethiopian troops within 120 days would have to withdraw.
Yes.
Close ally of the United States. How do you see that?
Yes, it says withdraw, but if you read the rest of the sentence, it says it's conditional too, with the arrival of sufficient UN troops. So who decides what number is sufficient? That's also a missing statement from that particular agreement.
And the idea of a ceasefire happening anytime within 30 days, how likely is that if those armed groups didn't sign up to this agreement?
That is another concern for us, because if you had inclusive agreement where all the stakeholders are included, then you had a chance of bringing people together. But now you have only one part of the group joining this agreement. So you have to have every faction included in this. It has nothing to do with individuals. It has everything to do with all the factions included. who are stakeholders.
Sadia Ali Aden of the Somali Diaspora Network, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.